The three friends hopped the terracotta wall. Past it were a few torches that lit up an old wooden sign warning that they were about to cross into hostile mob territory. But Zeta wasn't afraid, not with Rain's bow at the ready. Rift and Zeta carried stone swords as well, though they were of questionable durability. Stone was hard to come by without digging down deep past the sand, which carried the ever-present threat of a collapse. Wood was even more scarce, so anytime the friends spotted a dead bush poking out of the ground, they scavenged it for sticks, even if they had to walk a little out of their way. It wasn't long before Zeta heard the skitter of spiders close by, several sets of red eyes peering through the dark. So creepy. So useful. Gathering potion ingredients took a lot of time and effort, but Zeta was glad her friends were here to support her, because there was no way she could do this on her own. "I got this one," Zeta said, her grip on her sword tightening in her sweaty hand. She'd killed dozens of spiders, but it never got easier. She approached it with one eye open, her arm trembling as she swiped her sword through the giant 8-legged body. The spider jumped back, unfazed by the damage it suffered, and it surged toward Zeta, fangs bared. "Need some help?" Rain offered, bow raised. "No, save your arrows for the creepers," Zeta shouted back, taking another swipe at the spider and missing this time. She wished that she could say she was better at potioning than at fighting, but honestly, it was a toss-up. The spider got too close and bit her. Ouch. Not bad, just a nip in the elbow. She was more embarrassed than hurt. Now this was a matter of pride and vengeance. She readied her sword. Rift was next to her now, his sword drawn as well. "I can show you how it's done," Rift said, nudging Zeta out of the way. "Nah," Zeta said, pushing back with her sore elbow. She winced. "This is my spider, and besides, weren't you the one I had to save from an armor stand last week when you were trying to use it for target practice? It was a very aggressive armor stand," Rift said in his defense. "And it had better gear than I did." Zeta and Rift took a swing at the spider at the exact same time. Rift made contact, and the creature vanished into a puff of smoke right as Zeta's sword was about to hit it. Instead, her swipe cut straight through the air, and she continued spinning until her sword nicked Rift in his shin. Rift fell to the ground and started hissing, grabbing his shin and rocking back and forth. I'm okay, he said. "I'm so sorry," Zeta yelled. She stored her sword away and kneeled next to her friend. "Are you bleeding?" "Nah, luckily your blade is dull as dirt. We really need to keep an eye out for stone, so I can craft you a new one." "Who needs hostile mobs when I've got you too?" Rain said, coming over to look at the carnage. One badly bruised shin, two badly bruised egos. Zeta helped Rift up. She watched closely as he took a few tender steps. Zeta winced. "If it hurts that bad, maybe we should turn back. We can't have you hissing like that all night." "I'm not hiss." They all looked around, suddenly aware just how dark it had gotten. Not 4 feet away stood a creeper on 4 petite feet, its mottled green skin already flashing brilliant white. The creeper tilted its head, looking Zeta dead in the eyes, like it was taunting her. "Run!" Rain said. And Zeta tried. She really tried, but she was petrified. She'd never been this close to a creeper before, but she'd seen the destruction they caused. Craters 10 feet deep and 15 feet wide. Rift was screaming her name. He sounded far away. Had he left her standing here, or was it her panic making everything sound tinny and distant? Before Zeta could summon another thought, Rain bravely raised their bow and unleashed an arrow that hit the creeper square in the chest, knocking it back. Another well-placed arrow poofed the creature for good. All that remained was a pile of gunpowder. 5 minutes ago, Zeta would have been thrilled to obtain this ever-elusive ingredient that she could use to make splash potions, but now she was just filled with terror. Rain retrieved the gunpowder and offered it to Zeta. She took it, but she couldn't look her friend in the eyes. "I nearly got us all blown up," she muttered. She imagined what could have happened if her cousin had been here too, and a shiver ran through her. "Not on my watch," Rain said confidently. "Admittedly, we could work a little better together, but we're all safe. Do you have your brewing stand on you?" Zeta nodded and patted her pack. She always kept it handy. She never knew when a potioning emergency might pop up. Plus, she didn't want to risk her dad finding it in her bedroom. "Cool, then let's see how these splash potions you've been talking about work." "Now? Out here?" Zeta asked. "I know a safe place," Rift said. He led the friends farther away from town, steering clear of husks, with their dried-out skin and slow, shuffling feet that dragged through the sand. Their moans punctured the quiet of the night. Finally, after nearly an hour, the great rift came into view, ripping through the desert. Zeta's heart sped up in her chest. She'd never been this far away from town, but she could tell why adventurers were so enamored with the massive ravine. It was absolutely beautiful. The sheer drop bore sand and sandstone toward the top, but it turned to gray stone beneath, and as it plunged even deeper, Zeta could just make out some light blue or near the lava stream at the base. "Are those diamonds?" she asked, so excited and nervous and curious that it felt like her fist was in her throat. She'd been mining terracotta for almost 6 months now, and had never stumbled upon anything except coal and iron. Any ore they found was rushed off to the town vault, but miners did have rights to keep the first block of ore found in a vein of at least 4 blocks. Zeta imagined calling first rights on a diamond vein. She must have gotten too caught up in the fantasy, because now Rain was pulling her back from the cliff edge. "Careful," Rain said. "Check that out," Rift shouted, pointing at the cliff face. Jutting out from the wall of the ravine was an ancient structure that looked as if it had been half swallowed by sand. The moonlight caught just right against pale sandstone adorned with terracotta. "It's a desert pyramid," he said. "We're not going down there, are we?" Zeta asked. "No way. Much too dark in there. Much too dangerous. But it's pretty to look at from afar, yeah?" "Yeah," said Zeta, mostly still at a loss for words. The ravine was an achingly tender spot for her family, because it had spelled doom for Ashton's parents, but she knew that it was a source of pride for Rift's. He was named after it, in fact. This was where Rift and Rain's parents had first met, decades ago now. One of them from Sienna Dunes, and the other from a band of nomads that traveled the desert, trading their wares. They'd set up camp on the other side. It was a tale that was way too mushy for Zeta's liking, but it helped her to feel appreciation for the beauty out here, sitting right below the pain. The friends settled onto an outcropping at the cliff's edge, which gave them protection on 3 sides. Rift took out his crafting table and fashioned a quick sandstone wall to keep any other mobs from sneaking up on them. When he was done, he crafted a campfire, then Rain tossed some raw rabbit on it. The smell of cooking meat immediately made Zeta's mouth water. While it cooked, she set up her brewing stand. Zeta dug through her pack for ingredients, but things were sparse. She hadn't gotten the sugar for the swiftness potion. All she had were a couple of fermented spider eyes, the spider eye from their ill-fated kill from a couple hours ago, a sickly-looking carrot, a gold ingot, a whole heap of nether wart that she'd scrimped and saved for all summer, and some gunpowder finally. Zeta was more than eager to try it out. "I've got a rabbit's foot on me if you want to make one of those leaping potions," Rain said, dangling a foot out for Zeta to take. No, thanks," Zeta said quickly. She grimaced. As much as she loved eating rabbit, those little feet creeped her out like nothing else. She couldn't understand how people kept them for luck. After all, they hadn't been lucky for the rabbit. "You're sure?" Rain asked. "A leaping potion on the edge of a giant ravine is probably a bad idea. I can make a splash potion of poison," Zeta said. "It shouldn't be that hard." Most of the exciting potions required ingredients that were difficult to come by. She knew there were such rare finds in the town vault, but Mayor Maxine wouldn't allow Zeta through those enormous, piston-operated doors, no matter how much she begged and pleaded. The doors were thick, made from iron blocks, and a key was required for them to open, with technology much more advanced than anything else in the town. Sometimes Zeta had dreams about those doors, and what treasures were to be found on the other side of them. So without the mayor's help, it had taken Zeta months and months to find someone who had a blaze rod to trade so she could have craft her this brewing stand. Everything she'd learned about potioning so far had been hearsay and rumors, mostly from Reed, the guy who ran the bookshop. Sometimes he spoke to her about such things, wistful for the days when his library held books with actual knowledge. Now he sold book titles such as 101 Things to Do with Sand and How to Raise a Happy Potted Cactus, and 101 More Things to Do with Sand. There were no written recipes for Zeta to go by, so the exact amounts and proper brewing times were all guesses on her part. Still, she was eager and willing to experiment, even if it meant her experiments tended to go a little wonky. "Yeah, I could toss a couple poison potions at some hostile mobs and see how effective they are," Rain offered. "Weren't you trying something with invisibility?" asked Rift. "If we stand close enough together, the splash potion could work on all three of us." "Think of the mischief we could get into around town." "You get into enough mischief as it is," Zeta said. Rift was a bit of a prankster, on a mission to annoy every single citizen of Sienna Dunes with his mostly harmless tricks. With the town having a population of 325, it would take a while, but he'd yet to be detected. Rift had done 37 pranks so far that Zeta knew of, things like installing a hopper under the furnace in the mess hall so that all the food disappeared into it when cooked. He'd rigged an armor stand dressed in a creeper's head to jump out of Rain's closet. Rain was still a little sore about that one. And perhaps his best one so far was rigging the pressure plate on the mayor's office door to play an annoying tune on a hidden jukebox. It took them nearly a whole day to find the source of the awful music. Rift hadn't pranked Zeta yet, though, which kept her on edge. He tried a few times, but Zeta had always caught on to it. She couldn't let her guard down around him. He was brilliant, and a great friend. If only he would use his crafting skills for good. "Pretty please?" Rift asked, batting his eyes at her. "I made a few invisibility potions last night, but they have some issues," Zeta said. She wasn't sure where she'd gone wrong, though then again, the potion had mostly worked. Maybe with a few tweaks she'd get it right this time. "But I can try again, if you promise not to prank me. Ever." "You know I can't promise that," Rift said. "That's like asking me not to breathe. But how about I keep you supplied with redstone for the rest of the month?" Rift did have a nice stash of redstone that he was learning to incorporate into his crafting, and she knew how precious it was to him. A little pile of redstone dust would stretch Zeta's potions out and make the magic effects last longer. It wasn't a bad deal at all, except for the fact that Zeta would eventually come up on the wrong end of one of her friend's pranks, and from the sparkle in his eyes, she knew it was going to be a big one. "Fine," Zeta mumbled. Rift handed her 3 piles of sparkling red dust. "First installment. Use it on my invisibility potions." "My invisibility potions," Zeta corrected him. "You just get to bask in their aura," Rift grumbled. "Whatever, just get to brewing." Zeta spread her ingredients out before her. Nervousness gripped her. She hadn't even gotten a regular invisibility potion done correctly, and now here she was, adding more ingredients. She pulled out the fermented spider eyes, and everyone gasped at the smell. "It's like a rotten egg and a soggy sea pickle got into a fight," Riff said, pinching his nose. "Do you even know what a sea pickle smells like?" Rain asked, looking skeptical. "No, but I've got an active imagination, unlike you," Riff bit back. "Overactive is more like it," Rain mumbled to himself. Then the twins exchanged deep, menacing scowls. The only time they ever really looked alike was when they were mad at each other. "You get used to the smell," Zeta said, cutting through the tension and pretending to be chill about the whole situation. Pretending like she knew what she was doing. She set her 3 water bottles in the brewing stand, and moments later, the whole contraption started to spit and bubble. Was the water ready for the nether wart yet? Did it matter if she put it in hot versus cold? She dumped the warts in, a whole fistful, and waited. If there were any hostile mobs still lurking out there in the dark, the scent of this potion wafting through the crisp air certainly would turn them away. Next, she broke her ingot down into gold nuggets and crafted a golden carrot. It was a bit on the flimsy side, but she hoped it would do. She tossed it into the mix as well. The blue liquid deepened in color ever so slightly, and an odd shimmer spread along the surface. "Night vision potion," Zeta whispered, as if she hoped the twins would settle for this. Rain seemed interested, but Riff shook his head. "We've got torches," Riff said. "What's next?" His nose was nearly hovering over the brewing stand. "Back up a bit," Zeta warned. "I'm not going to be responsible if the fumes turn your eyelashes into spiders." "Can that happen?" Riff said, backing up quickly and rubbing at his eyes with his fists. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to make sure his lashes hadn't become arthropods. Zeta smiled to herself. "Next ingredient," she said, aggressively ignoring her friend's concern. "Fermented spider eye." It was definitely staring at her. "Definitely." She shuddered and threw it into the potion. It sparked and fizzled, and when the hue of the liquid turned light purple, Zeta felt she was getting close. She wiped the sweat from her brow. Next, the redstone. How much should she use? She tossed in a handful, but nothing happened. The potion just sat there, looking lackluster. If this potion didn't work, Riff would never let her hear the end of it. Maybe she'd bragged about her potioning skills a little too much. In reality, she knew next to nothing. But Riff was so good at crafting, and Rain was so good with a bow, and Zeta just wanted to excel at something that wasn't mining terracotta. Might as well go for it, Zeta said to herself, then tossed the rest of the redstone in. She wasn't sure if she should wait to add the gunpowder or not, but she went ahead and mixed that in, too. Immediately, the potion flashed and spat at her. She jumped back so it wouldn't land on her skin. "Perfectly normal," she said, managing to keep the terror out of her voice. As the concoction settled, a brilliant silvery sheen shone through the glass. Zeta dared to get close. She could feel the heat radiating from the bottle without even touching it. "We just need to let it simmer for a bit now." She dusted her hands together, like she was confident in her work and not secretly afraid her whole brewing stand would explode. "Food's done," Rain called out, stabbing an arrow into a beautifully roasted rabbit to remove it from the campfire. Juices trickled out and sizzled as they hit the flame. Zeta hadn't realized how famished she was after trekking this far from home. Her stomach finally didn't feel like it was in knots. She could relax. She took a bite and savored the meat. She loved a good feast. That was one of her favorite things about Sienna Dunes. People were always celebrating something and coming together for elaborate dinners for just about any occasion. Rabbit stew was always a hit, as was the mushroom version her dad made, loaded up with 2 different types of mushrooms. Baked potatoes and fresh veggies made for great fillers, but sometimes they get something exotic, like a bright red apple or a melon from places where lush vegetation grew. There was a feast for the full moon, and one for the new moon. Birthdays, weddings, and holidays, like Founder's Day or Miner's Day or the eve of hostile mobs where all the little kids made masks of ghasts or zombified piglins or creepers, and then begged their neighbors for a treat. There was a huge parade and everything, with handheld floats made of paper flowers, as well as games and prizes and fireworks. Zetta was much too old for that now, but she'd helped her cousin Ashton with his costume last year, a giant black mask of some kind of mythical dragon that was way too big for his head. He'd needed both his hands to steady it, which meant that Zetta had to tag along with him, holding his treat bag as they walked from house to house. She'd have liked to be able to say she'd avoided the temptation of sneaking treats from his bag when he wasn't paying attention, but she couldn't. Zetta looked up at the moon. It was down to a sliver now, which meant the eve of hostile mobs was just around the corner. If she was lucky, she could snag some melon and tuck it away to practice a healing potion. Assuming she could get her hands on some more gold, too, to make the melon nice and glistering. She could almost smell the potion brewing now, sweet from the melon, and not a single fermented spider to foul the whole thing up. Like this potion of invisibility that she'd forgotten completely about. Zetta sat up quickly and wiped the grease from her fingers onto her tunic, then ran back over to the brewing stand. How long had she been fantasizing about food and holidays? Had the potion brewed too long? The silvery luster was completely gone now. The potion looked beyond dull, more gray than purple, and the water had boiled down substantially. This was wrong. All wrong. "Smells awful," Riff said. "Is it ready?" Yes," Zetta said, and when Riff raised a suspicious brow at her uncertainty, she tapped the glass with her fingertip and said, "Definitely ready." She grabbed one of the glass bottles and instructed her friends to huddle close. What was the worst that could happen? If the spell went horribly wrong, they'd just go milk Ginger the cow and reverse the effects. No harm, no foul, right? Zetta raised the bottle up high, but before she could throw it, an arrow whizzed past her ear. Rain's head whipped in the direction the arrow had come from, and almost instantly, they had their bow drawn and an arrow notched. Right beyond the hastily made sandstone wall, 3 scraggly skeletons gathered, staring the friends down. The first shot had missed, but when Riff suddenly cried out in pain, Zetta knew the second one hadn't.